Ms. Linahan, you have the floor, and I'll ask our Secretary, Mr. Ratcliffe, to give you 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your time. My name is Alice Linahan, and I'm a parent of 3 children here in Argyle ISD. I handed out a piece of paper to all of y'all, and I wanted you to be aware of a book that's been put out by a teacher. His name is Brad McQueen. He's from Arizona. He's written a book, The Cult of Common Core. What he makes clear is that a year ago, he didn't know what any of this was. He was a teacher. He saw new things coming in. He thought it was just another education reform. Now he's scared. Now he sees that this is much bigger than just another education reform, that it's actually a federal takeover of our education system. And we're under the illusion here in Texas that we don't have Common Core because our legislators passed HB 462 that said no to Common Core. But what we know is that Common Core is coming in through the back door, and you have to look at the strategies and the tactics of how it's been implemented throughout the country. And I'll start first with the Common Core national standards, which we don't align to here in Texas, but they said it was state-led by the governors. What you found out after doing research is that it wasn't. It was the copyright for the Common Core national standards is owned by the National Governors Association, which is a nonprofit think tank out of Washington, D.C. Then you look at C-Scope in Texas. They said it was district-led, being pushed by the districts. Well, what we find out that it's not district-led, that the copyright for the C-Scope, scope and sequence and assessments was owned by a nonprofit organization that the 20 Education Service Center directors formed, and they own the copyright. Another nonprofit organization that has access to our tax dollars. Then you look at the people that are behind it, and the names keep coming up. David Coleman is one of them. He's known as the mastermind of the Common Core. Well, he is now the president of the College Board. The College Board owns the copyright for the SAT and our national assessments and the AP classes. And you've probably heard the big pushback against APUSH, the new AP US History framework. They own the copyright to the framework and the assessment. It's the same strategy and the same tactic. And what's happening, and I opted our daughter out of the PSAT, not because I think anybody here in Argyle is teaching her bad things, but that's how they're using the national assessments to get this kind of curriculum. And there's a quote by Brad McQueen in this article that I gave you. When you have control of the tests and the standards, you have control of the content in the classroom. And what we see here in Texas, and especially in math, Dr. James Milgram, who was brought on to validate the Common Core national standards, would not, because he said it would put our American children behind 2 to 3 years in math.
It was brought out at the Can I See conference, and I know, Dr. Milgram, you've talked about it before, how devastating this will be to minority communities because they won't have the opportunities. Is that correct?
Well, yes, this is correct, and it's even understating the thing. Even the students in the richest communities, if they are not going to really exclusive schools, I mean schools in the neighborhood of $40,000, $50,000 a year in tuition, schools like in my area, Menlo College, which is really middle school, high school, but it's kids like David Packard's children that go to Menlo. If they don't go to schools like that, which actually teach serious mathematics at the same level as is taught in the high-achieving countries, if they don't go to schools like that, they're at a severe disadvantage. I was just thinking I should maybe tell you a little story from about 5 or 6, 7 years ago. The area which I work in these days is basically in the mathematics of robotics. And we got a major league grant from the National Science Foundation to do some work in that area. And the grant funded at least one postdoc to help us with what we wanted to do. And so we made a determined effort, because with this grant and everything else, we could probably get the most, any postdoc in the country in robotics would be glad to come to Stanford and work with us. And so we made a very determined effort to find an American, a young PhD in robotics, who was a U.S. citizen, who we could ask to help us out. And we couldn't find one. The person we hired scared us both, however, because this was the first person who got their degree in robotics at a university in China rather than getting their degree in robotics in the U.S., coming from China and getting their degree in robotics in the U.S. This person actually got his degree in China, and that means that right now in China, they are doing absolutely first-level work and creating a research community in one of the most important areas for applications of mathematics there is. And that's the problem that we face. Well, he was a superb postdoc, and we wrote some really important papers. But the real problem, what this really meant to both of us, the principal directors of the project, was that in the future, although he came to work with us today, in the future, if we want to work with the top-level people, we're going to have to go to China or Japan or Korea. And that's the future we're looking at. What it does do is it shows that Common Core, it shows that in my perspective, and my perspective, as I've indicated, there's every reason to assume I know what I'm talking about. That from my perspective, Common Core does not come close to the rhetoric that surrounds it. It doesn't even begin to approach the issues that it was supposedly designed to attack. The things it does are completely distinct from what need to be done.
2 to 3 years. And the way the content and the professional development of the teachers today, the way that they are teaching math, will put our children behind 2 to 3 years in math.
1 minute.
And what is important to understand is this is being pushed down to lower grades. And especially in math, what we are seeing across the country is that it is not only going to put our children back, but it is developmentally inappropriate, and they're not able to handle it. And what the reaction of children is across the country is it's very dangerous. They're harming themselves, they're hurting themselves. And I just want you to know that when I come up and when we're trying to educate people, it's not because I'm trying to attack anybody at Argyle, because I know that we have great teachers. I want you to be aware of the strategies and the tactics and what they're doing to go around you. Let me close by saying, local compliance does not equal local control. The power is in your hands to control what gets funded in our school district.
But losing our liberties is exactly what we're talking about in the cult of the Common Core, because the freedoms of each school district will no longer be. They'll be answering to a federal government, to a mandate out of a centralized location. No longer will they have local control. No longer will they be able to say, we're not going to teach that here. We'd like to teach it in this manner. Brad McQueen was a teacher. He is a teacher for 11 years, and he's been other things besides that, I think is what I was going to say, which I think gives him the ability, the beauty to see the problems with this. Brad McQueen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And folks can find you on Facebook, The Cult of the Common Core. They can also find the book online. You and I were talking. Teachers are having a hard time speaking out on this, though they don't like it. Some of the teachers' unions are actually now speaking out on this. But many teachers face repercussions as those who push Common Core work to destroy the dissenters.
Exactly. In the school system, if you want to cheerlead for Common Core, the departments of education will give you the pom-poms to cheerlead for it. In fact, they're using Teachers of the Year to push Common Core. A lot of times when you see teachers on television ads or writing, many times when they're writing op-eds, they'll say Teacher of the Year, Iowa Teacher of the Year, Arizona Teacher of the Year at the bottom, as if it gives them more weight. And each state chooses their own Teacher of the Year. What they never disclose is the entire Teacher of the Year program is run and administered by a Common Core organization called the Council of Chief State School Officers. It holds the copyright to the Common Core standards. So, of course, they're going to choose people that are for the Common Core, and they even brag about how they on the Achieve website, it's another Common Core group, how they use Teachers of the Year to push the Common Core message. So if you're for Common Core, you can say anything you want. Now, to be fair to teachers, many of them are like parents across the country. Many of them are parents across the country. Teachers are. A lot of them don't see the full picture of Common Core. A lot of them still think it's just learning standards that are just being introduced into the schools. But as they have more experience with it, I think they're getting that not only are they learning standards, they're NSA-like data suctioning systems being put in our schools. They're testing, nationalized testing groups being formed. There's also the connection between the kids' data and their testing data. It directly connects to the teacher. And some people might say, well, that's a good idea because we can keep teachers accountable. And that's sort of the cover they use with Common Core, that's what they use it for. And but what that connection between the kids' test results and what they're doing in the class and how they connect to the teacher, that part of Common Core is the compliance method for Common Core. They make sure if a kid sort of doesn't do well on a certain section of the test related to First Amendment rights, for instance, like you were talking about, maybe we should go back. If they don't give the right answers, maybe we need to go back into that kid's data stream and look online at the teacher's lesson plans, which are now all online. Teachers' grades are all online. Teachers' evaluations are all online. Let's go see where that teacher, what they were teaching and when they taught it. So it's a compliance method. And also the kids' information and testing results are directly tied to teacher pay and teacher evaluations now. That's why you're hearing the teachers' unions coming out against it in some areas, because you go after teachers' pay, you go after the union dues. The teachers' unions, the NEAs and the AFTs of the world, they were strongly for Common Core back in 2010 when it was implemented, and they were okay having our kids be the victim of Common Core, these Common Core predators. But when it started hurting their bottom line, now they're against it. I mean, I'm grateful that they're joining the chorus and shouting to get rid of this Common Core thing. But you've got to be clear that that's the component they're really after.
And now they see it coming after their liberty as well, and how they teach, how they'll be able to implement a lesson. It's exactly what we're talking about with those pastors. Don't just think the government, the mayor will come after those folks. They'll be after you next if they're not stopped for this intrusion.
And the thing is, they usually go after people of faith first. A lot of times they're trying to pull in the faith-based schools now with Common Core, kind of like they did with the Catholic bishops with Obamacare. They got their support, and then they nailed them when they didn't want to hand out birth control. It's the same thing. They're trying to court the faith-based crowds to get them on board. If you go, because they're an existential threat to Common Core. They're teaching sort of principles and values that are grounded in something else other than conformity and control being given over to a earthly power, so to speak. So they're courting the faith-based, the Catholic schools, and a lot of Catholic schools are aligning up with the Common Core curriculum. I don't know about the databases yet, but Common Core, it affects public schools, charter schools, religious schools, and homeschoolers. It's going to definitely affect as
Absolutely.
well. And homeschoolers are definitely the biggest threat to Common Core and progressives in general, because parents are taking control and they're exercising their right as parents and controlling their kids' education and imparting their values. That's a definite threat to progressives in Washington, D.C., in both the Republican and Democrat Party.
Absolutely. And you mentioned progressives, and let me just say it again. If you hear someone talk about being a progressive and they're running for office, understand progressive means it will be oppressive. Their views will oppress you because they're going to implement large governmental policies, and that will limit your individual liberties. When you hear someone talk about being a liberal, in most instances, that means your liberties will be attacked. We saw that in Iowa. When the liberals were elected, they took out smoking, made it illegal in public buildings and private businesses. Like it or not, market should determine that. The public should determine that, not your government.
With the progressives as well, it's in their name, they progressively are doing these things. They have an end game in mind, and they progressively, like the mayor in Houston, that happens. Then another thing happens across the country, then another thing, till it becomes the norm, and then they reach a little further. Then they reach a little further. Education was more locally controlled in the past, and slowly but surely, progressively, it has been centralized into Washington, D.C., with No Child Left Behind, was part of it under George Bush. And then Obama's administration with Common Core is just the final solution for our children's minds and their education in our country's exceptionalism.
And I want to talk about a couple things. You're right. Education used to be more local when we had, higher scores is what they used to tell us. And I would say we put people on the moon using flashcards and one-room schoolhouses. That local control creates competition. At the same time, I think you talk in your book, we hear so much about us failing compared to other countries. I think you mention the things that we're strong in. Let's see those other countries when they develop a Google, an internet, the creations, the innovations that still come out of America.
Exactly, and that's the thing that progressives don't need to. They aren't based in reason. They'll just keep saying the same thing over and over, even though it doesn't make sense, till you think you're crazy for applying reason to this. They always cite our kids as being less than other countries' kids, and they cite this PISA test, this PISA test. It's an acronym test. It's a Eurocentric test that is given every couple of years, and our kids aren't the top kids. Usually it's Finland and Singapore and Shanghai or something. And they always cite that as, well, our kids must be failing because these other kids are doing so well on these tests. Well, I always say, great, let them be the championship test takers in the world. Look at what our kids grow up to do. Our kids grow up to put a man on the moon. Our kids grow up to create a military that is the most advanced, technologically advanced military in the world, that protects the world from tyrants time and time again, and tyranny that has its roots in those very same one-size-fits-all centrally controlled countries that are topping our kids on some little test.
And I had a CIA agent tell me one time, at least I'm told he was a CIA agent, that America is the one who creates. Other countries may conform or make the assembly line, make it better, cheaper, put it out in mass quantities better than we do. But America is the creation, the innovation, the good ideas. We've seen that. I also want to touch on, you mentioned in our part one, and for those of you who want to find the show in its entirety, we're so thankful for our American Family Radio listeners across the nation. But for those who want to find the archives of the show, Tamara Scott Live, you can go to Tamara Scott Live on YouTube, and you'll find the Brad McQueen shows. You can find them part one and part two. You talked about them changing history and that this will affect homeschoolers, private schoolers, Christian schoolers in time, and we already see that. David Coleman, the architect behind the Common Core, has gone to the College Board. And on this show, you can also find that archive with Larry Krieger and Jane Robbins from American Principles Project. We exposed the fact that the Advanced Placement U.S. History exam has been changed. The transparency has been diminished, and what they've done, what used to be a 5-page outline to the AP programs, the schools participating, is now well over 100-page document on what you must teach, and that you need know nothing else besides what's in this document. And it's not so transparent anymore. America's triumphs are diminished. Our military triumphs are not touted. Any errors we've had, any issues we've overcome, slavery or anything else has been really overblown and overemphasized. We are no longer an exceptional nation into this teaching. And that is the Advanced Placement U.S. History exam. The Republican National Committee, I know, passed a resolution because I was able to draft it with the help of Jane Robbins. It passed unanimously at their Chicago meeting that we would ask legislators, congressional members, not to fund the College Board, until we get transparency back in this testing and accuracy back in the content being tested. So, Brad, you're absolutely right in what you're talking about. Coming forward, this will affect and impact homeschoolers, private schoolers, Christian schoolers, but they are working to change the history, the heritage, the legacy, the lineage we have in America.
Yeah, because if you can change that in one generation, you can change America. If you take out the exceptionalism, like in the AP guidelines, AP American History guidelines, you take out our American exceptionalism, what's left in those guidelines for what should be taught to basically some of our brightest kids take advanced placement classes so they can get college credit in high school for history. So what remains to be taught and what they're teaching is American oppressionism, victimization, social injustice, imperialism. It's quite disgusting, and they talk very little, if at all, about our great founding fathers and our great military leaders, or our military in general doesn't get much of a mention unless it's in a negative light. And so the homeschoolers and people that go to religious schools, if you want to get AP credit, you're going to have to pass that test that is based on that set of criteria.
Right.
And with David Coleman being head of the College Board, they've changed the SAT college entrance exam, which affects college entrance admissions as well. They've dumbed it down. They've aligned it with Common Core. So homeschoolers and others will be at a disadvantage if they don't align their instruction to the Common Core. And there's also another line of thought, and I wouldn't put it past these people, that with the chambers of commerce, they like to see our K through 12 educational system be used as a human resource development, so that they can sort of ask our school systems to create the type of workers they want. I could see a situation where you go to a job interview and it's mandatory that you have attended a college and career ready program. That's code for Common Core. And if you're a homeschooler, you don't have that.
And we know that those programs don't work. The college and career doesn't necessarily work. James Milgram, who was on the committee with the Common Core, the only mathematician on the committee, Professor Emeritus from Stanford, I believe, refused to sign off on it when he saw how poor the math standards were, how lacking it would be. They would not be STEM ready. So though your governors and your promotional educational Department of Education materials may promote STEM or college career and ready, because they say it in no way indicates that they will actually do it.
No. And it doesn't prepare them for college or career. And even Jason Zimba, one of the other architects of Common Core, specifically says that if you want to go on to a more advanced engineering, math, technology sort of career, Common Core is not going to prepare you for that. You need to do more than is prescribed. So it's a dumbed down version where everyone gets a trophy, rather than lifting up our system to to raise kids' expectations for their academic achievement. We've dumbed it down and lowered the bar so that everyone can jump over it.
And I want to touch on one more thing. I looked it up while we were talking. Carolyn McClarty, the National Committee woman out of Oklahoma, another wonderful asset to the Republican National Committee. She chairs the Resolution Committee. Put this out yesterday, $800 million annual budget. $800 million annual budget. $1 million of that goes towards lobbying. This is your college board, by the way. And they receive $79 million in direct funding from the federal government.